Have you ever witnessed a moment of injustice that changed everything? 15-year-old black teenager humiliated upon entering gun shop. An hour later, they were frozen in their tracks. Kid, are you lost? The video game store is across the street. The salesman didn't even look up from his computer when Kevin walked through the door of Arsenal Premium, the most exclusive gun shop in town. Kevin Williams was only 15 years old and never imagined that a simple visit to a store would become the catalyst for a turnaround that would leave the entire town speechless. Dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, he looked completely out of place among the display cases filled with collector's weapons and military equipment that cost more than cars. Actually, I'm looking for information on carry permits, Kevin replied in a calm voice that contrasted with his youthful appearance. The salesman's laughter echoed through the store, attracting the attention of the other employees. Permits, kid, you can't even drive yet. Go play outside before I call the police for trespassing. The manager, a burly man named Rick Patterson, approached with a condescending smile. At 52, Patterson had built his reputation in town as someone who knew who to talk to and kept things organized. His store catered exclusively to a select clientele, businessmen, politicians, and collectors with money. What's going on here? Patterson eyed Kevin up and down as if assessing a threat. Son, this isn't a store for people like you. We have high-value merchandise here. Can you imagine the strength it takes to stay calm under such disrespect? Kevin stood motionless, his eyes calmly scanning the weapons displayed on the walls. There was something about his posture, an almost unnatural serenity for someone his age, that should have served as a warning. But Patterson and his employees were too busy feeding their own prejudices. I understand perfectly well where I am, Kevin replied, his voice remaining respectful. My father always said that knowledge has no age. The mention of his father made Patterson roll his eyes. Sure. And let me guess, your father is a big collector, isn't he? You guys always make up these stories. What Patterson didn't know was that every cruel word, every look of contempt was being meticulously recorded in the memory of someone who had learned early on that true strength is not manifested in shouting or confrontation, but in the strategic patience of those who know how to wait for the right moment. A regular customer, a local lawyer named Morrison, laughed loudly. Rick, you should put a sign on the door. Serious people only. That would avoid these awkward situations. Kevin nodded politely. Thanks for the suggestion. I'll make a note of it. The phrase sounded innocent, almost naive. But if anyone paid attention to the determined gleam in his eyes, the kind of determination that only exists in those who carry a purpose greater than their age suggests, they might have realized that these were not words of defeat, but of someone who was just beginning to play a game far more complex than anyone in that store could imagine. If you've ever felt the bitter taste of being judged by your appearance, you know that sometimes the best response doesn't come right away, but when they least expect it. Subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a 15-year-old teenager was about to teach a lesson that none of those adults would ever forget. Did you write everything down? Patterson laughed loudly, shaking his head at the other customers. Kid, you can't even read those specifications. Go home and play soldier before I lose my patience. Kevin continued to look at the guns on the wall, his eyes fixed on a specific Glock 17 pistol. That one has a modified tactical sighting system, he said calmly, pointing to the gun. Military version, right? The silence that followed lasted only 3 seconds before Patterson burst out laughing. Military version. Did you hear that? The kid's been watching too many action movies. Morrison, the lawyer, approached with renewed interest in the humiliation. Rick, let me explain something to the young man here. He leaned in condescendingly. Guns aren't toys. This is serious stuff for serious people. People who work, who pay taxes, who contribute to society. I understand perfectly, Kevin replied, his voice remaining as calm as it began to unnerve some of those present. My father always talked about responsibility with firearms. Your father, Patterson raised his eyebrows, exchanging meaningful glances with Morrison. And what exactly does your father do? Mall security. The question was accompanied by muffled chuckles from the other customers. Kevin lowered his head slightly, but not out of shame. It was the same gesture he made as a child, standing next to his father, watching veterans being disrespected at official ceremonies by people who would never understand the weight of serving their country. Colonel James Williams had taught his son that there are battles that are won with honor and others that are won with strategic patience. During 23 years of military service, James had faced 3 wars and countless classified missions, always returning home with the same philosophy. Kevin's son, true strength isn't about proving you're strong. It's about knowing when to use that strength. James had died 6 months earlier on an international humanitarian mission, leaving Kevin and his mother with a modest pension and a house full of medals that most people would never have the opportunity to earn. In his father's desk drawer, Kevin had found letters from generals, photographs with presidents, and documents that proved a legacy of service that people like Patterson could never understand. He worked in security, Kevin replied, technically correct, omitting that it was international security. Sure you did, Patterson said dismissively. Always the same story. You guys always make up these important professions to impress people. A new customer entered the store. A burly man wearing expensive clothes, clearly accustomed to having his words respected. Patterson immediately changed his demeanor, adopting a servile tone. Mr. Thompson, it's good to see you again. Thompson barely acknowledged him, his eyes fixed on Kevin with irritation. Rick, what's this situation? I thought you kept this establishment select. I was just taking care of that, Mr. Thompson. The boy was on his way out. Kevin stood motionless, his eyes moving calmly between the faces staring at him with growing hostility. There was something about his posture, a quietness that didn't suit his age, that should have alerted these men. But they were too busy feeding their own sense of superiority. Actually, Kevin said softly, I still have some questions about carry permits for emancipated minors. The statement hit the conversation like a bomb. Morrison laughed nervously. Emancipated minor. Kid, you don't look old enough to drive, let alone carry a gun. I'm 15 and was legally emancipated 3 months ago, Kevin replied with the same unnatural calm. I need to understand the legal procedures. Thompson frowned. Emancipated? And your parents agreed to that? My father died in the line of duty. My mother supported the decision. The mention of his father's death created a moment of discomfort, but Patterson quickly resumed his hostile attitude. Look, kid, I don't know what story you're making up, but this isn't the place for legal games. This is serious business. Kevin nodded respectfully. That's why I'm here. I want to do everything right. Right. Thompson laughed bitterly. The right thing would be for you to be in school, not disturbing business establishments with legal fantasies. What none of these men knew was that Kevin had spent the last 6 months meticulously studying gun laws, legal procedures, and federal regulations. Not out of teenage whimsy, but because he had inherited more than just his father's medals. He had also inherited a sense of justice that would not tolerate being underestimated or humiliated without consequences. In the school folder he carried, which everyone assumed contained only homework, Kevin kept certified copies of his emancipation papers, official correspondence regarding his father's military pension, and a letter of recommendation signed by a 3-star general who had known James Williams personally. More importantly, Kevin had carefully documented every discriminatory interaction he had faced in the months since his father's death. Every prejudiced comment, every closed door, every look of contempt had been recorded with a military precision his father had taught him. I understand that you have your doubts, Kevin said calmly, adjusting the strap of his backpack. Perhaps I should come back with proper documentation. Patterson laughed one last time. Documentation? Sure, kid. Come back when you're old enough for these conversations. Kevin nodded politely and headed for the door, but stopped halfway. Mr. Patterson, can I ask you a personal question? What? Patterson replied, still smiling condescendingly. Did you ever serve in the armed forces? The question caught Patterson off guard. No, never. Why? Kevin nodded slowly, as if processing important information. Just curious. My dad always said you could tell who had served by the way they treated others. The observation sounded innocent, almost philosophical. But there was something in Kevin's tone, a quiet certainty that made Patterson feel an inexplicable discomfort, as if he had just failed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Every cruel word, every contemptuous laugh, every condescending glance was being recorded in the memory of someone who had learned early on that the real battle does not take place at the moment of provocation, but in the silent preparation that precedes the final victory. What those men couldn't see behind the calm eyes of a 15-year-old teenager was the determination forged in the steel of a military education and tempered by the pain of a recent loss that had turned a boy into something far more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Kevin left Arsenal Premium without haste, but his mind was already 3 steps ahead. In the parking lot, he took out his cell phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Kevin Williams, son of Colonel James." On the other end of the line, the aged but steady voice of the veteran who had served under his father for 8 years answered immediately. "Kevin, how are you, kid? I still can't believe we lost James." "I'm fine, sir. I need a favor related to a legal situation. Do you still have contacts at the Department of Licensing and Regulating?" Rodriguez hesitated. "Only a second." "Of course. What do you need?" Kevin quickly explained the situation at Arsenal Premium, omitting the most painful details of the humiliation, but focusing on the irregularities he had observed during his visit. "Interesting," Rodriguez muttered. "You know, your father taught me to always check the licenses of the establishments we visited, right? Military habit. And coincidentally, I've had some concerns about Arsenal Premium for months." While Kevin talked in the parking lot, inside the store, Patterson was celebrating with Morrison and Thompson what they considered an easy victory. "Did you see how the kid ran out of here?" Patterson laughed loudly, cleaning a collector's rifle. "These people need to learn that there are appropriate places for everyone." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Exactly. If we start allowing just anyone in here, soon our select clientele will be looking elsewhere." Morrison, always the astute lawyer, raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you find it strange that the boy mentioned emancipation and those specific questions about licenses?" "Oh, please," Patterson dismissed with a wave. "These kids watch too much YouTube and think they know the law. He probably doesn't even know that legal emancipation requires approval from a federal judge." What Patterson didn't know was that Kevin not only knew this, he had gone through the entire process 3 months earlier. After Kevin's father died, his mother, Nurse Sarah Williams, had insisted on emancipation so her son could directly access military benefits and make legal decisions related to his father's military estate. Federal Judge Harrison, a Vietnam veteran and personal friend of Colonel Williams, had processed the emancipation in record time after reviewing James' military record and Kevin's exceptional academic achievements. "Rodriguez," Kevin continued on the phone. "Could you check to see if Arsenal Premium is complying with all federal protocols, especially those related to discrimination in service and document verification?" "I can do better than that, kid. Your father saved my life on 2 separate occasions. I'm going to call my friend at the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. If there's any impropriety at that store, we'll find it." Inside Arsenal Premium, Patterson was bragging to a growing group of regular customers about how he had put the kid in his place. "The problem today is that these young people don't understand hierarchy," Patterson declared, proudly polishing a custom gold pistol. "In my day, you respected your superiors." Speaking of superiors, Morrison interjected maliciously. "The kid asked if you served in the military, didn't you? What was your answer again?" Patterson blushed slightly. The truth was that he had tried to enlist 3 times during his youth, only to be rejected for health reasons he had never admitted publicly. "I served my country in other ways. Not every patriot has to take up arms." Thompson laughed. "Sure, Rick, you serve by selling guns to those who really know how to use them." The joke drew general laughter, but it created a subtle discomfort in Patterson. There was something about the way Kevin had asked the question, an apparent innocence that seemed to carry a greater weight. Meanwhile, Kevin drove home in his second-hand Honda Civic, a gift from his mother when he turned 15. In the garage, he opened a metal box that held his father's most important belongings. Among the medals, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, a Distinguished Service Cross, he found what he was looking for, a letter of recommendation signed by General Mitchell Roberts, commander of the humanitarian operation where James Williams had died. Colonel Williams demonstrated exceptional leadership under extreme pressure, the letter read. His son Kevin, who demonstrates similar maturity and principles, has my unconditional support for any future endeavors. Kevin photographed the letter and sent it to Rodriguez along with copies of his emancipation papers and academic certificates. It wasn't arrogance. It was simply preparation, just as his father had taught him. Always have your paperwork in order, son. James used to say, the well-documented truth is the most powerful weapon there is. The phone rang. Rodriguez, Kevin, I just got off the phone with my contact at the ATF. She's going to pay a routine visit to Arsenal Premium tomorrow. And man, when she heard you were Colonel Williams' son, she was very interested in hearing your side of the story. Thanks, Captain, but I want to do this the right way. No special treatment. Rodriguez laughed. Boy, you're just like your father. But let me tell you something. Sometimes doing things the right way means using all the legal resources at your disposal, and your father made a lot of friends in important places. Kevin hung up and looked at the framed photograph of his father in military uniform. James Williams stared directly at the camera with the same calm, determined expression Kevin had worn in the store. In the kitchen, his mother Sarah was preparing dinner, still wearing her nurse's uniform after a 12-hour shift at the hospital. How did it go at the gun store? She asked without looking up from the pot. Educational, Kevin replied simply. Sarah stopped stirring the food and turned to look at her son. She had worked in emergency rooms long enough to recognize that particular tone, the calm before the storm. Kevin, your father always said that the best revenge is to live well and do the right thing. Don't become bitter because of ignorant people. I don't intend to become bitter, Mom. But I also don't intend to let them treat other young people the way they treated me today. Sarah nodded slowly. There was something in her son's eyes, a determination inherited directly from his father, that told her the situation was far from over. Outside, a car with official license plates slowly drove down the street, its occupant checking addresses on a clipboard. At Arsenal Premium, Patterson ended his day counting money, completely unaware that every cruel word spoken a few hours earlier had set in motion a series of events that would change his life forever. As he put away his father's medals, Kevin reflected on the difference between justice and revenge. One was emotional and impulsive, the other calculated and inevitable. And thanks to the lessons of a decorated colonel and the love of a mother who had raised his son to make a difference in the world, Kevin knew exactly which path to choose. Tomorrow would be a very interesting day at Arsenal Premium, and Patterson would finally discover that there are consequences for those who confuse dignity with weakness and respect with fear. The next morning, Patterson arrived at Arsenal Premium at 8 o'clock sharp, as he had done every day for 15 years. He put on his custom lab coat with the store logo embroidered on it, checked the cash register, and turned on the security system, completely oblivious to the black sedan parked across the street. Federal Agent Lisa Chun watched the comings and goings through her sunglasses, a folder of documents on the passenger seat. A 10-year veteran of the ATF, she had conducted hundreds of inspections, but this one was special. The name Colonel James Williams opened doors most people didn't even know existed. At 9:15, Chun crossed the street with purposeful steps. The store bell announced her entrance and Patterson looked up from his computer with his automatic business smile. Good morning. How can I help you? Chen showed her federal ID. Agent Chun, ATF. Routine inspection to verify compliance with federal regulations. Patterson's smile vanished instantly. Inspection, but we passed the last audit 2 years ago. Inspections can occur at any time. Mr. Patterson, I need to check your sales records, licenses, and customer service protocols. Morrison, who had arrived to buy ammunition, witnessed the conversation and whispered nervously, Rick, what's going on? Patterson tried to maintain his composure, but his hands trembled slightly as he opened the license file. Sure, Agent, we have everything in order here. Chun began methodically examining the documents, making notes on her clipboard. I received a report about possible discrimination in customer service. Do you have specific protocols for treating all customers equally? Discrimination. Patterson forced a nervous laugh. Absolutely not. We treat all customers with the same respect. Interesting. Chen pulled a digital recorder from her briefcase. Then you wouldn't mind if I played back some recordings I made yesterday. Patterson's blood ran cold. Morrison took a step back, suddenly interested in examining the guns on the wall. Kevin's clear voice echoed through the recorder. Actually, I'm looking for information on carry permits, followed by Patterson's cruel laughter. Licenses, kid, you can't even drive yet. Go play outside before I call the police for trespassing. Chen paused the recording. Is this your voice, Mr. Patterson? Well, the kid looked suspicious. Suspicious? How? Chen pressed, her eyebrows arching. Did he make any threats? Did he display aggressive behavior? Patterson swallowed hard. Not exactly, but Chen played more of the recording, including the comments about people like you and the cruel jokes about welfare in thrift stores. With each sentence, Patterson sank deeper into his chair. Mr. Patterson, Chen continued in a steady voice. The young man you humiliated yesterday is Kevin Williams, son of Colonel James Williams, killed in the line of duty 6 months ago. Kevin is legally emancipated and has a constitutional right to be treated with dignity in commercial establishments. Morrison let out a low curse. Patterson felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Colonel Williams. Patterson stammered, but the boy didn't say. Why should he? Chen interrupted. Does a 15-year-old have to announce his deceased father's military record in order to receive basic courtesy? Chen opened an envelope and spread photographs across the counter. James Williams receiving medals, greeting generals at official White House ceremonies. Colonel Williams served for 23 years, including 3 combat tours and classified missions. He died saving civilians in an international humanitarian operation. Chen fixed Patterson with a stare that could cut steel, and you mocked his son because he looked suspicious. Thompson, who had arrived to pick up an order, witnessed the scene in growing silence. His face was as pale as paper. Chen continued relentlessly. Kevin recorded the entire interaction with a legal protection app he installed after facing repeated discrimination since his father's death. He has the legal right to sue this establishment for discrimination based on age and appearance. Patterson attempted a desperate defense. Officer Chen, it was a misunderstanding. If we had known who he was exactly, Chen cut him off. If you had known who he was, not who he is, a person's character doesn't change based on his parents' profession or bank account. Chen pulled out more documents. Kevin Williams has an IQ of 142, a perfect grade point average, and has already been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. He is also certified in first aid, and has saved 2 people from drowning while volunteering as a lifeguard. Each fact was like a slap in Patterson's face. The suspicious boy he had humiliated was more qualified and educated than most of his adult clients. Furthermore, Chen continued, our investigation has revealed that this establishment charges different prices based on the appearance of its customers, that violates federal trade regulations. Morrison tried to hide behind a bookcase, but Chen had noticed him. Mr. Morrison, correct? Attorney, you were present during the discrimination and actively encouraged the behavior. Morrison opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Chen closed the folder with a definitive sound. Arsenal Premium is under federal investigation. Licenses will be reviewed and there is a high probability of temporary suspension of operations. Patterson slumped in his chair. 15 years of building the business and it was all falling apart because of a few minutes of gratuitous cruelty against a teenager. Agent Chen, Patterson pleaded. Can't there be some way to work this out? I can compensate the boy. Compensate? Chen laughed coldly. Mr. Patterson, Kevin Williams doesn't want your money. He wants justice. And justice is exactly what he's going to get. The store bell rang and Kevin walked in calmly, wearing the same simple clothes as the day before. But now, with Chen at his side and the truth revealed, his presence carried a completely different weight. Patterson looked at Kevin with new eyes, no longer seeing a suspicious kid, but the son of an American hero, a bright young man who had been cruelly judged by his appearance. "Kevin," Shin said respectfully. "Do you need anything else for the report?" Kevin looked directly at Patterson. "No, Agent Shun, I think the message has been conveyed." Thompson, Morrison, and Patterson remained silent, finally understanding that they had seriously underestimated not only Kevin, but the consequences of their own prejudices. Outside, another federal sedan pulled up, carrying additional investigators. Arsenal Premium was about to discover that discriminating against the son of an American hero had ramifications that extended far beyond their small, prejudiced minds. And Kevin Williams, at 15 years old, had just proven that dignity and respect are not privileges to be granted based on appearance, but fundamental rights that he was willing to defend with the same courage his father had shown on the battlefield. 3 months after the federal investigation, Arsenal Premium closed its doors for good. Patterson lost not only his federal license to sell guns, but also faced a tax audit that revealed tax irregularities dating back 5 years. His mortgaged home and personal savings evaporated in legal fees and federal fines. Morrison had his law license suspended for 6 months after the Bar Association discovered his active involvement in documented discrimination. His most important clients migrated to other firms, leaving him working on smaller cases to try to rebuild his ruined reputation. Thompson saw his government contracts canceled when the investigation revealed that his company also engaged in systematic hiring discrimination. The man who prided himself on keeping things select found that his own exclusive practices had become his biggest business nightmare. Kevin Williams, on the other hand, turned the experience into something much bigger than personal revenge. With the support of military veterans and civil rights lawyers, he created the Colonel James Williams Foundation, an organization dedicated to combating discrimination against minority youth in commercial establishments. The foundation offers free legal assistance for discrimination cases, civil rights education for teenagers, and mentoring programs connecting young people with military veterans. In just 3 months, the organization had already successfully sued 12 establishments for discriminatory practices and achieved reforms in customer service policies at more than 50 companies. Kevin was accepted into the military academy on a full academic merit scholarship, following in his father's footsteps, but now with a personal mission to ensure that others did not face the same prejudice he had experienced. During the foundation's opening ceremony held in the local university auditorium, more than 300 people attended, including generals, veterans, local officials, and dozens of young people who had faced similar discrimination. "My father always taught me that true strength isn't about fighting back with anger, but about turning injustice into positive change," Kevin told an emotional audience. "When those men humiliated me in that store, they didn't know they were planting the seed for something much bigger than their own ignorance." In the audience, sitting in the front row, Sarah Williams watched her son with tears of pride. At her side, Captain Rodriguez whispered, "James would be so proud." The boy didn't just honor his father's memory. He multiplied his legacy. The final irony came a few weeks later when Patterson tried to get a job at a sporting goods store. The manager, a young black man in his 20s, recognized his name during the interview. "Mr. Patterson, isn't it? I read about your situation at Arsenal Premium." The young man paused, leafing through the resume. "Unfortunately, it's our policy not to hire people with a history of documented discrimination. I hope you understand." Patterson left the interview understanding for the first time how his own actions had created the barriers he now faced. The humiliation he had inflicted on Kevin had come back to him multiplied, but this time accompanied by a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Kevin had learned something that not all military handbooks teach. Sometimes the most complete victory is not destroying the enemy but transforming the entire battlefield. He had not only defended his own dignity. He had created a system to protect the dignity of everyone who came after him. 2 years later, when Kevin graduated as a second lieutenant from the military academy, Patterson watched the ceremony on local television. The young man he had dismissed as a suspicious kid now appeared saluting generals and being praised for exceptional academic merit. In that moment, Patterson finally understood that he had not only judged wrongly, but that he had wasted an opportunity to know someone extraordinary simply because his prejudices were greater than his humanity. Kevin's true revenge was not the destruction of Patterson, but the building of a legacy that would ensure that future generations would not have to face the same disrespect. He turned 3 minutes of humiliation into decades of positive change. The lesson Kevin Williams taught transcends issues of race, age, or social class. When we face injustice, we can choose to respond with bitterness or build bridges to a more just world. Kevin chose to build, and in the process, he honored not only his father's memory, but redefined what it means to turn pain into purpose. If you've ever faced discrimination or seen someone else treated unfairly, you know that sometimes the best response isn't the most obvious one. Subscribe to Black Voices for more stories that prove dignity, education, and determination are the most powerful weapons against prejudice. And the true victory comes from lifting up not just yourself but the entire society around you.